Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 641, The My Pillow Game. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norton. Thanks for joining us. The Cannes Advertising Festival is complete, and the Lions have been awarded. So now that we've seen the best in Adland, what trends are we noting, and what have we learned? Tonight, we'll look at the highs and lows and try to chart what it all means. Also, purpose without teeth, whether media diversity leads to actual diversity, secondhand replacing fast fashion, plus this week's fair, fail, foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the founder and principal consultant at R. Cameron Consulting, brand and marketing innovation expert, Ms. Rose Cameron. Rose, hi, how are you?
Bob, I am always better for chatting with you of an evening. Hello, my darling.
Hello to you. I'm always better for having you on the program, so this is great. Now, also with us, we welcome back managing partner and marketing practice lead at CI Squared, as well as co-host of the Across the Pond Marketing Transformed podcast, Mr. Samuel Monnie. Hi, Sam.
Hey, Bob. Thanks for having me back, and you'll be pleased to know that I'm willing and able.
Okay. I thought that was going to go someplace else, but I'm glad you're willing and able because we really need you on this show. And finally, he's the Associate Vice President of Marketing Strategy at Arizona State University, author, speaker, Mr. Adam Pierno. Adam, hi, how are you?
Bob, I'm back and I'm ready to step my game up.
Well, that's good. Or your gain, one way or another. Just a little inside joke from earlier before we got on the show. Well, let's start off with Cannes. Rose, Cannes just finished up. It's Cannes. You know, what can you say? I mean, it's just like, it's a whole bunch of ads that people are disputing whether or not they're great. And some people are thinking this is really good work. Other people are thinking this is just a whole bunch of personal accolades and not really working on the results and the effectiveness of the ads. There's a lot of controversy, as always, around the Cannes Ad Festival. But I did want to talk about some of the maybe interesting developments that came out of the show, as well as the trends and issues, the trends that we're seeing happening in the world of advertising, you know. So I'm wondering what your impressions are of this, for, you know, just in a macro sense of the festival, and just give me a little bit of your thoughts about where the industry is moving right now.
Sure. It's interesting when you said, Rose, I'd like you to talk on this topic. I was like, no, absolutely.
I hate, you know what? It's just like, I hate doing the Cannes Ad Festival. I hate covering it. But I do it every year, you know, because it's an important part of the advertising culture, and it's important to us in so many ways, even though so many of us just feel like it's a waste of time and a drunken party in the south of France. I mean, this year, obviously, it wasn't a drunken party, but still, you know, there's a lot of skepticism about the importance of this festival. Still, it's important, you know, whether or not we like it or not, and we got to talk about it.
Yeah, I think it's that great environment where a lot of, you know, nerdy advertising people, you know, can think that they can fantasize that they're actually sexy. And but the thing that struck me about this year's, because they weren't allowed to go there and have the complete experiential surround and feel sexy because they were actually in France and all of that delightfulness. The thing that struck me when I looked at the pieces and the awards this year were really that there was some good stuff in there, actually.
Really was.
can and I, don't get on that well. But, and certain trends, they said, oh, this was a trend I saw. I'm like, that's not a bloody trend. That's just a reality. So, for example, they said, oh, comedy, it's different around the world. No. Really? Really?
Well, let's be fair. Let's be fair. The article you're referencing put forward that comedy is a double-edged sword, which is also a duh comment. But it does bring up the fact that comedy is so localized. It's hard to be effective in an ad award show with comedy. You can't just do comedy and assume it's going to win something.
If you had a copywriter, right? If it was not purely done by an art director, because, we know that physical comedy can be completely unifying in a global sense, right?
Right.
The one that is not is the nuances of language and plays on words and history that are very highly attuned regional in nature, right? So when the jester narrative goes into play in any wordy sense, then you run into issues because of that. And the thing that struck me, though, is that one of the things that you can see in the appreciation of the physical humor is something I'm seeing across the board, which is an attraction to just ritual overall. And I didn't really see that in the discussions. And I was like, guys, talk about ritual, because we've seen so many
Explain that. Just bring that to the forward a little bit. What are we talking about when we mean rituals?
So when I talk about rituals, I talk about essential workers walking to work and people coming to their windows and applauding them. I'm talking about the people in Italy standing on their balconies and singing to each other because they miss human interaction so much. These rituals of these enormous attendance now at churches, because we don't actually have to get up and go to them, but we can stay in our pajamas and watch them on our computers, that there is this desire to be united in ritual, and we're definitely seeing that come out. And that's a highly telegraphic thing. It's a highly repetitive thing. So
and it's easily communicated. It's easily communicated with visual. I mean, even if you don't have the same cultural reference, you can see it on the screen and recognize it as ritual for what it is.
Absolutely. So, I'm like, okay, thanks for the humor comment. If you want to have one that wins, have one visual gag, and, that's the one you put in for a global audience of judges, right? They also talked about gaming skewing older, and there I'm just like, well, gee, duh, I'm of the generation of the first massive gamers, the Gen Xers, and we're such a small group of people. We're only 11% of the population here in the United States. And we were the first generation. So guess what? We're getting older, and guess what? Gaming's skewing older because we still like to do gaming. And throw on top of that, and Adam, I'm sure you're going to recognize this one, we've got Gen Z coming up. So everybody talks about the millennials because they're 27% of the population, therefore cha-ching money. But the Gen Zs have been the first generation where they have spent their entire lives learning through gaming. Okay, so the whole aspect of gaming education and being on a digital platform is there. So I don't think this is so much about gaming skewing older. I think that now what we're seeing is a universal use of gaming to engage people across all generations.
Let's dig into that. Let's get the rest of the panel in this discussion, because this was one of the more interesting things, because Rose is right. The way they positioned it as gaming getting older is kind of a duh comment. There's nothing interesting about it. But recognizing the fact that gaming played such a huge part in all demographics in advertising this year says something really powerful that I think the article may have missed. And I'm wondering, Adam, since Rose mentioned you, what your thoughts on that are, and whether or not gaming is indeed a trend that all advertising should be recognizing to a higher extent, not just gamification, but actual gaming. And how do we implement that in our regular advertising programs?
Rose is dead on. I mean, if you have the oldest generation of that has adopted gaming and has grown up with it is a more accurate way to say it than skewing older. But that Generation Z and the generation behind them are native to gaming. So it's not that we're all playing the same games. That's what's confusing to me about the article and the awards themselves. You're seeing games used as a motivator, and we saw that through social. In the early days of social, the idea of gamifying, they just couldn't do it effectively. But now it's pretty cheap to sprinkle real games and make them really engaging and get people's interest in a way that's really meaningful, regardless of age. But it does, by age, it does matter what kind of game you're playing or what kind of device you're playing on, or where you might discover a game is probably the key thing that I've learned about.
Yeah, I mean, certainly mobile would be a big part of this, right, Sam? I mean, mobile's meteoric growth is what's driving most of this gaming adoption into all aspects of our lives, not just advertising, but everywhere.
Yeah, as I'm listening in, and we're talking about the trends here, and what's the insight behind all of this. And for me, a lot of the insight over the last 18 months or so is this kind of the human, what remains human, and what part of humanity remains sort of in touch and connected, and play is such a fundamental part of it. So it kind of makes sense that gaming is a thing that is growing across different demographics, because there is a very human aspect of playing a game. My wife plays Uno, and if I dare interrupt her while she's about to beat someone on an iPad, it's a fate worse than hell. But it's kind of interesting how gaming, I think sometimes we think of gaming as some sort of $50 billion complicated an Xbox thing, but actually gaming is really play, and anything that involves play is very human. It elevates the senses, the mind, and it connects us all. So I think that's, for me, the macro trend. I don't know if I've answered your question, Bob, but as I'm reflecting, it's a perfect time to inject more humanity, and rather than what better way than gaming, play, and those related areas for marketers and for brands to tap into, because that gets to the core of us as human beings.
And Sam, the thing that you were talking about as well, which is fun healing as well, right? Fun is a great way it's an acceptable way for us to release, right? And I think that we found ourselves kind of holed up in our homes, being all toxic and turned in on ourselves. And this was a way where you could laugh and you could scream and you could kill somebody, and it was okay, and you could let out all of those frustrations in a relatively productive fashion.
Yeah, you can win, you can lose, and that's the point, right? So all the human emotions which have been curtailed for a number of people, for other people, obviously, especially frontline workers and healthcare and people like that, they've had to be sort of carrying on as normal. But I think that's coming through, and that insight. I'm not a big gamer myself, and some of the data was talking about, the influencers and the big cultural influencers like Travis Scott, and bringing huge audiences. But I think, to the point of this conversation, let's not bias it to, think of the young whippersnappers. This is something that relates to all demographics in different ways. So if you think all gaming, I must build an Xbox or do something related to some shoot 'em up type game, you're missing the macro of what the totality of it is, and how it can relate to your brand or your company or your organization, but also the decision makers who are looking for creative solutions to business challenges, and then the creatives being willing, able, and confident to actually pitch those ideas and have the brand people say yes, versus being shut down. Because I think that universal insight is definitely rife to tap into, and hopefully we can all benefit from.
Yeah, and I get concerned when they look. These kind of trend articles can be really troubling, because this was a trend that was, birthed during a pandemic when everybody was remote, as we pointed out, that we were all trying to figure out ways to connect. The idea of it being a human way to connect, and then being able to reverse engineer that and connect it to your brand, or connect it to what you're selling, or connect it to the message that you have, is what gets lost in the trend of gaming is skewing older. So let's launch a bunch of games aimed at boomers and make it, all Fox News related content, the MyPillow game. No, that's not really the point. The point is that games brought people together in a way when we couldn't connect. Even Netflix, entertained us, but we were still craving human connection or competition or play together in a way that you could share an experience with someone even when they weren't there, even if you were just sending a screenshot of a score. That's the trend to me.
Yeah. And there's also a control trend there, right, Adam? I mean, I got heavily hooked on Lily's Garden. Oh my goodness, I didn't realize how much money I could spend in such a very short period of time. Can we say over $1,000 in less than a week? I mean, this stuff really makes some extraordinary dosh. And what I was doing was I was creating a controlled world where I had the power to have everything perfect the way I wanted it. And so I had this great sense as a woman in this time of complete chaos and craziness to have complete control over this idealized environment. And it brought me a lot of soothing calm until I saw the bill.
I was going to say.
Well, I'm the same. I'm the same way. I mean, I've been on the show since I've been on the show.
How much you're spending at the time, and now you got the bit. It's like, oh, hey, this is a free shout out. Hopefully, they'll sponsor you next time or something.
No.
I've been saying on this show since March or April that Animal Crossing is what got me through this. I mean, I played Animal Crossing every time, and it's the exact same discussion, like you were saying, Rose. It's about control and peace and zen and being on a beach. It's just like it's got all those factors rolled into it. Another one of the trends, though, in this article, Rose, why is it that every article on advertising that talks about trends in the future and where advertising going has to have a section devoted to purpose?
Purpose.
I mean, it's just like, it's such a toothless word at this point because
Can I use the A word in swearing? ASS.
Yeah.
Because I think that this should not be about purpose. I think this should be, don't be an asshole, right? Right? It's
yeah.
But Rose, you're saying it the American way. You're from your heritage. There's a different way of pronouncing that word, but I don't know if Bob wants to hear that version of you.
We'll not do that one. Thank you very much.
Yeah, but it's interesting to me. I think that one of the things I've been doing an enormous amount of research into is pollution, death of planet. Those happy things. And one of the things that I found in the course of that is that globally people all agree that pollution and illness is our number one threat, and it's due to greed and waste, right?
Right.
So as many of those brands profit from greed and waste, it's now time to step forward with a percentage of those earnings to try to rectify the situation.
Right.
And, that's kind of the don't be an asshole. So we know that we can make an impact. And that was the biggest insight for me during COVID was I realized I had a deep and abiding pessimistic Jewish Scottish fear at the depth of my heart that it was too late, right?
Right.
That he had run the old girl into the ground and we wouldn't be able to come back from this. And what we discovered was, no, she is far stronger than we've ever thought, and she can make it back if we just stop messing about. So when you see, some of the pieces that came forward during the course of this can, where you have the making bread ritualization of breast exams. So they created the bread exam, or the Minecraft Uncensored Library, right? From Reporters Without Borders, where they're essentially bringing out these articles that were censored in their countries, or the womb story, which my extraordinarily conservative physical self I ran screaming from that. But they're right. It's ensuring that the female history and stories are heard. I mean, or the sale list, or the contract, the change. I mean, some big things are happening in this marketing that's well beyond, say the old silk cut ads or some of the more beautiful pieces of film. These things may look a little rough around the edges, but they're actually fundamentally changing the world. So, to that, I was like, well, maybe they're not doing as much greenwashing anymore. These are actually things I look especially at the contract for change that AB InBev's doing, where they're writing those contracts with the farmers to say, we'll give you the best price if you move your farms to organic.
Right.
Now, that's huge. That's a 3-year project where you don't know who's going to be in government potentially at the end of that, and whether or not you'll have a market thereafter for this investment you just put in your farm. But InBev is making it possible. Now, it will serve them well. Trust me, there aren't enough farms out there doing organic, so it serves them well. But my God, to have a transparent sourcing strategy like this that is actually doing better for the world, that's huge to me.
Yeah, it transformed what purpose was always it transforms purpose into what it was always supposed to be. And I think that's what's being recognized here. It's not that purpose needs to be part of every campaign. It's more that purpose needs to have real purpose. You need to actually. It's like it grew up or something.
There's got to be a say-do ratio, and the do's got to be more than the say, and it's actually stuff you care about, and it's baked in. And I think what's happening, and I know we'll come on to other topics later in the show. The problem brands and companies are having now is that they're being exposed, because for every good deed that AB does that you talked about, there's another area where there's a group or a cohort who feeling marginalized or excluded, or so it's challenging for brands to do this. I think for me, purpose it's been around for a while, and now there's just more evidence of brands and organizations doing it. However, what they need to realize is that they're going to be under increasing scrutiny throughout their whole ecosystem. So not only what you do in terms of sustainability, but it's also what you do in terms of equity and inclusion and representation, what you do politically, what you do. So you can't just be goody two shoes in one place and then ignore the donations you make to shady individuals. So it's now, I think, there's going to be more, financial transactions, security, and being hacked and transfer. So there's just so many ways that having a social cause and doing right for your right for your employees, right for your communities, and right for your shareholders. And if you have those three stakeholders all kept equally, then that's going to be very tricky for a lot of companies who have these great ad campaigns, they're winning awards at Cannes, but behind the scenes, there's those other two communities, their employees aren't, and the communities are being damaged. Well, that's a problem. So I think for purpose to be relevant, it's now no longer a marketing campaign, an ad thing you spend $1 million on. Is actually core to the DNA of your brand, your organization, and the way you work, from beyond the P&L to everything you do. And a lot of companies aren't there.
We've got almost nothing to talk about for our second topic now, Sam. But I think it's time. Time for us.
Don't worry, I can add another soapbox.
I think it's time for us to move into that topic, because I think it's important. The only thing left to talk about on Cannes was they were saying Zoom culture, and I'm just like, duh, Zoom culture, of course.
It was just one big. No insult to the person who wrote it, but throughout the whole thing.
But the good thing about the article was not that it was on point. It was more that it got to points almost in a circular fashion. I mean, it got around to them eventually, and there were some hints at some deeper trends. Like you picked out that ritual thing out of this, and I think that's what this article was doing. It was inspiring me to think a little bit more deeply about what those trends were, and I think it was successful there. And the Zoom culture is the same thing. I mean, everybody was on Zoom because of the pandemic, but it's just like it does show that we're a much more connected society, even though we're distant from each other.
Yeah, and I wanted to build on that. I think what was interesting to reflect upon is all the work got done, great work was delivered. I think the report saying, hey, entries are down, but even despite it being 2 years of worth of work. But then we're saying, hey, there's some awesome work that is coming through. Right. And in theory, it was all done in remote, collaborative, Zoom-based ways. So what's interesting is the industry has found, like many others, have found other ways of working and now have to figure out how to move forward. And even hosting this Cannes festival. But all I can think is the next physical one is going to be the most debauched, the most crazy, the most...
yes.
And so I've never been, and I don't know if I want to go, because the next time round, it's going to be, there's going to be lots of, I think all your HR policies and all sorts of things are going to have to be
As I heard on TV the other day, there's no mask for chlamydia. So there you go.
There you go. So, yes, it's called a dental dam. Anyhow, on the Zoom culture, one thing I just wanted to point out was the real trend that this was identifying was that we have now entered the perfect storm with regards employees feeling empowered to do things their way. And so we are now in a situation where we know it can be done. Before we just estimated it could be done, and now we know it can be done. And you're seeing the problems. You're seeing people who don't want to go back. You take that knowledge of it can be done, and you add to that Gen X, small group, millennials. Well, they've got their younger children right now, and they really have discovered that they can work at home, take care of those children, feel like decent parents, and also get the work done. And then, I think that is so important, and we cannot forget it, that this Zoom culture in the workplace has shown people that flexible work life is very possible. It does work. And now as they try to retrench, we've got a full court press against going back.
Well, it's the people in charge who are the people I'm speaking to, there's going to be absolute carnage. If you're in the marketing and advertising industry,
yep.
listen very closely. 40% of your employees are about to quit if you don't do the right thing by them in the next few months. And so please don't mandate a back to the office policy, or else don't install the software that tracks whether people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. Have trust and faith that you actually have adults employed and treat them well. And most 2-3 days back in the office is the most that people are going to sign up to. But if you don't provide flexible options and or more flexible dynamic options, especially for those marginalized communities, the minorities, women in the marketing and advertising industries, you're going to get carnage. And what's good about the carnage that's coming is they're going to leave for better options. So this is not, oh no, we are unemployed, what do we do? It's, we're going to actually sign up to a company which says, look, 2 days a week max in the office, make it work on your schedule. And I'm having all those conversations with my peers, and it seems like the legacy, especially the more unfortunately, the data's even indicating it tends to be the legacy companies led by men are the ones saying you must be back or else. And,
yes.
And there's even data implying that. So I'm begging the C-suite, and especially the CMOs out there, please don't defer to the CEO who says back or else, because you're going to lose your people. Agencies, you're going to lose your people. And there are so many good, smart agencies out there who are realizing that and pivoting their model to be more inclusive. So if you're a diverse minority, female in the marketing advertising industry, there are so many options out there, and the world is becoming more yours than it has ever been based on this new normal or never normal of the back to work remote thing. There's some great changes coming, and I'm very optimistic about that.
Hear, hear.
Well, Adam, I don't know what we're going to talk about with purpose at this point. I think we've covered most of it, but there was an interesting article about how LGBTQ advocates, while they appreciate your brand's support during Pride Month, it's the other 11 months they worry about, and it sounds very similar to what the Black Lives Matter people were saying and what the Asian American groups were saying. I mean, it's just like it's fine to stand up for people, during their one time of the year when everybody recognizes them. But it's another thing to have it part of your DNA and have a real purpose built around it. And I know we've talked endlessly on this show as well as other shows about the need for consistency and purpose. So is purpose useless for most brands unless you commit to more? Or is it simply just becoming a necessity to at least appear caring? I mean, what's your thoughts?
Well, luckily, I think I could take this in a different direction. Number one, I would argue that showing appreciation, support, having people's backs in minority or different groups than the mainstream group, that might not be a purpose. That might just actually being a caring person and being human, a caring brand, being a human, having empathy. Giving a care, as I say. And so what's frustrating is that, we're cynical. As consumers, we're cynical, especially in America where we see this. And even if a brand's doing the right thing they break out the rainbow, they break out the black avatar for the period that they were told to do that on their social media channel. When it switches off, my brain still says, you see that? They only cared about it when it was time for them to care about it, when the calendar told them it was appropriate to do it. I'm not sure if that's really fair to those brands in all cases. But because, as we just talked about in the last topic, because so many brands have been caught with their pants down and faking it, or just kind of trying to greenwash it or rainbow wash it or whatever the term is. There's so many cases of it. I don't even know what the accurate term would be for how they washed it. But how many tried to fake it that we just assume it's fake now. And I've always contended, even in my very early days in this business, that it is okay for a company to not line up with a purpose. It's okay for a company to say, our purpose is just come out and say, we're going to give you the best products we can or the best services, and we're going to make money. I'm okay with it. What people get pissed off about and what frustrates me as a consumer or as a marketer is when they lie. Don't do that. I don't need you to have a purpose. But if you say that you have a purpose, if you say we support Pride specifically, or these people specifically that we want to support, then by God, you better do it. And you better back it up. And July 1st, you still better believe it and act that way, and don't change over the calendar and all of a sudden support the next thing and forget about what you were saying the month before, where your employees are like, oh yeah, that was a t-shirt we had to wear in our stores for a month, but now we don't do that anymore. Like, I need proof. And in the age of social, I can scroll down far enough to track that you did it or didn't do it, and how much you really believe it. So, well, the evidence is there.
Yeah, I mean, it's really funny you bring that up about that commitment and having this ongoing connection with the cause, not just being there occasionally, because it's even more than that. Sometimes it goes into be real about the things you support. Put your money where your mouth is in the way you operate. I think it was, I'm forgetting which of the apparel brands, the outdoor apparel brands, did this recently. Perhaps maybe one of you saw it as well, but they basically said, we're not going to support anything that has anything to do with the petroleum industry anymore, and we're not going to be we're not going to allow any deliveries via anything but electric trucks and stuff like that. And the petroleum industry shot back and said, I guess you don't want to sell any products because all of your products are made with petroleum. What I mean? I forget which of them was. I don't want to name the name because I'm not really sure. But I mean, that kind of thing just sits really, really badly when you stand up for a cause, but you haven't thought through, are we able to live up to this cause?
And just in defense of that company, whomever they are, it is so complex. You can make these statements like the 2025 commitments to lowering your overall consumption and increasing your consumption of recycled products and all of this. But if you think about it, the machines that are the corporations today were built over, in some cases, hundreds of years, and they have built a system, a machine that works. And now we're coming in, we're saying we are fundamentally changing so many elements of that system with regards what it runs on, what it's fueled on, who the partnerships you have. I mean, doing these things in an environmentally healthy fashion or in a diversity sensitive fashion. There are so many systems that these companies are built upon, right? Mm-hmm. That to change it, they say they want to do the right thing. And they'll say, oh, heck yeah, 2025, we're going to be all the way down and it's going to be this. There's not enough supply in the world of recycled plastics. There's not enough financial merit to getting those products. I mean, there are so many complex things that these CEOs are coming out there and they want to be known as a good guy. They want to be known as having a positive effect on these companies. But the supply might not be out there in the world yet. And if it is, their move wholesale to it may crush the supply and cause even larger issues. So a lot of people look at these do-good situations in very black and white ways. But the reality is, in the complex global business that we are today, it's not that easy. And you've got to stage it and trial it and test it to make sure that your company doesn't go bankrupt due to your belief system.
Well, I think it's what what purpose is accountability, and the question is, what do you want to be accountable for?
Correct.
And that's the challenge people are having, right? Because I'll take this bit, please. Thank you very much. And this, I think, the core topic here is about the LGBTQ advocates and that, you know, Pride Month. People raise the rainbow flag for a month and everything's fine for a month, and it's like, well, 3/4 in this article we're reading, 3/4 of LGBTQ employees have faced discrimination. So that raising the flag doesn't help me getting fired, getting insulted, being paid less. No, that doesn't solve that problem. And furthermore, there's this popular information report which showed that companies that have donated over $10 million to lawmakers with a 0 HR Human Rights Council score or supported anti-trans legislation, and I'm not going to name them because I don't want to get sued, but there's a couple of reports out there, including retailers and telecoms companies, transportation companies, DIY retail, social media companies. So my problem is, how can you be an employer who says, yes, we welcome all these communities, here's our rainbow flag, but we're going to absolutely directly funding, our PACs are going to be funding people who are passing this legislation? How can you look me in the eye as an employee? And that's the problem. So you want to be accountable for the plastic and the waste and the environment, but you don't want to be accountable for how you treat me as a human being, people with disabilities, people from minority groups, people, same-sex couples. So there are so many stakeholders who are now quite rightly wanting to be recognized, and there is tumbleweed or silence at the top. So it is absolutely difficult for a CEO, the C-suite. They have some tough decisions to make. But boo-hoo, you're the C-suite. You get paid mega dollars for doing that. So so that's your job. And so I have empathy and I have compassion, but that's why you're getting paid to make it better. To be transparent in what's going on, and own up to the accountability, and therefore, and then treat us as humans and adults. And I think that's where people want to go quiet. So they'll put the rainbow flag up, but they won't respond to reporter questions about why are you funding this anti-trans legislation. Yeah. And the thing is, your employees see that. We see that. And so accountability, people are talking about cancel culture. Isn't it just accountability? And if you don't want to be accountable for stuff, say so, but don't complain about being cancelled by doing things. So that's, for me, the dilemma people face. And as I said, I have empathy and compassion for the people in charge. But when I see how much you're getting paid and all your comp package and your benefits and your stock options, I don't have that much, what's the word? I also therefore believe you are the right person to be accountable, to make it better and to do it with integrity.
Yeah, and that's the premise of how I interpreted the article too. Is it's a little bit like the article uses the word purpose. We talk about purpose, lacking teeth or lacking support, and consumers get upset about the other 11 months that is not LGBTQ month, for support. But not every organization is this hyper-connected, branded, top-to-bottom organization where the CEO is aware of everything that's happening, including the social media campaign, in which maybe an outsourced agency is just trying to fill a content calendar. I have witnessed this, where they're going, next week is National Pizza Day, and then the week after that is LGBTQ Day, and we'll just create a post and we'll just bang that out and post it. And they're not actually connecting any of those things in some cases to what we call a purpose. But when they do that, I don't think they realize the commitment that they're making to those people who see that, to their customers who buy into it, to their peers in the marketplace who see these things and think like, oh, okay, then they must support this. They're saying it so that it must have meaning. And it makes it all the more embarrassing when you pull up the threads and you realize, how disconnected they really are in practice at parts of the organization. And it's doubly true for sustainability issues, where it's so complex, I can't expect someone in the comm side beneath the C-suite to have awareness of those issues and challenges.
Well, I want to continue this conversation of purpose, because it seems like all our topics have some kind of centered around that one subject. But a lot of talk's been made recently over majority Black-owned media companies pressuring brands for their fair share of the media spend. But some now are questioning whether recent wins are doing anything to improve diversity within the media and ad industries. Sam, it's a pretty legitimate concern, but I got to ask you, is media diversification the right starting point, or does it just cover over the real issues of inequality within the industry. What's your take on it? Is it a good thing for the short term? Is it a good thing for the long term? Your thoughts?
Well, I'm mostly an optimistic person, but on this one, I'm pessimistic. And maybe it's because I've been watching Succession, I'm halfway through season 2, and I'm realizing that. It talks about media companies and everything. And so if you haven't watched it, HBO in the US, I don't know what network it is elsewhere, and it's basically a toxic family who are big own lots of media properties and just how they make decisions. And I'm thinking, there's no room for someone who looks or sounds like me in that setup. And unfortunately, that world is portrayed in theory, hyperbolically on TV. We look at the reality, certainly talking about the US, and black people are 13-14% of the population, and now some companies are saying, right, good, we're going to spend 2%. And it's like, wait, oh no, let's go for 5%. And I'm going, but hang on, that doesn't even represent I don't understand where you get your numbers from. And the core of this for me, in terms of is it the right starting point, or does it just cover up? And for me, it kind of comes back to the mindset of who you hire, how you pay, who you promote, who you mentor, who you fast track. And you realize that a lot of these actions by these companies are performative at best, right? Because you've got, and as Rose talked about this, endemic systematic issues in organizations that have been around for hundreds of years. And advertising, and I use this quote, people get mad at me, Cindy Gallup, who says advertising is white guys talking to white guys about other white guys. And that hasn't changed in the last few years, despite what we've seen, the social unrest and the advocacy for marginalized groups. The fundamentals of the industry, the fundamentals of the decision makers have not changed. And so the latest issue, for those who aren't fully up to speed, is essentially saying, hey, the black-owned media is not getting the dollars from the advertisers. And in specific cases, Byron Allen and a bunch of other people took out full-page ads calling Mary Barra, CEO of General Motors, racist. And people are saying, how dare you do that? GM spent $3 billion, and they came out and said, look, we're going to spend. There's a debate. They're being accused of spending 0.5% on black media, and they're saying, no, we spend 2%. I'm going, but that's still not. That's not a good number to be bragging about, right?
It's penny wise, pound foolish, right?
Yeah, and so that's the problem. You're starting from a position of weakness. You're getting called out, and then you're getting defensive about something you don't really want to do, and then you're claiming something which isn't good in the standard of things because you're going to make it good. So it's like paying women fairly, right? If we go at the current rate of paying women, it's going to take 100 years for women to get the same pay as men. That's not good enough. No one's prepared to wait for 100 years. So the challenge, linking back to what we talked about before, is it appears performative because there's a lack of transparency. But I mean, for me, there's kind of a couple of positives that I can look to even though sort of talking about being pessimistic. How do you change the game? And yes, it's not directly media. And so some organizations are saying, I think they've made a 2% commitment, Group M, and I think IPG have pledged a 5% commitment to be spent on black-owned media by 2023. I'm thinking, wow, what were you doing before?
That's what I thought.
What were you doing?
I thought, are you spending 4.589 right now, so you'll make that 5?
I mean, it's peanuts. And so so what LinkedIn have done, they've just said, look, we're going to pay all our diversity and inclusion leads, whoever leads those affinity groups, we're going to pay them $10,000 a year. That changes the game because now you're valuing what they do. Because in my experience, those people have had lack of support, lack of interest. People managers haven't showed up. No one's valued the work. Now I'm going to pay you a lot of money. Oh, it must be legit. I mean, Popeyes is another company I'll give a shout out to because they published their scorecard and it showed that, but what they did is they showed the good, bad, and the ugly. So they said, look, 25% of our consumers are black. We have 40% in casting. But when it comes to agencies, only 8%. And when it comes to production, only 6%. That is clearly below expectation and where they need to be. So at least they're transparent and say, hey, here's where we're struggling and we need to be better and we need help. And for me, that's the way forward. When you're called out, when you're held to account, show the numbers, admit the reality and try and be better. But that isn't the natural response of the people in charge. And that's, for me, the fundamental challenge is why are you bragging about 2%? And again, I respect to the companies that are saying, I think Target and a bunch of other companies, L'Oreal, Pernod Ricard, Nestle, hey, we're going to do 2%. But really, is that truly good enough?
And Sam, it gets even worse when you go into, okay, let's just talk anything that's not pasty white, okay? If we start talking about like, let's start targeting Latino populations, where quite frankly, there are a lot of super dark Latino populations because they mixed with the original island slaves, etc. So, okay, let's target them. Oh, there's an extra cost in translation. Oh dear, that's costly. Maybe we don't want to do that. So, I mean, I think there's another aspect, which is vanilla is the cheapest flavor. And when you start going to, different, more nuanced flavors, you get a lot more money being spent, because it's not just like you can take that pre-existing ad and put it on this new media and all's well and good, right? You actually have to, look at that media as part of the overall creative solution, and then create content that will work the most effectively in that to engage the audience in question. So here we are in a situation where we can't do the blockbuster ad that'll be, 500K plus and use it across all mediums. Here, we're starting to have to look at our actual content and build something unique to these different audiences that we're investing in.
One of the things that I listen to these conversations over and over again, and it comes back to representation is the problem. It's not whether or not we're spending 2% or 1% or 5% or 10% on Black-owned media companies. It's more about having representation at the table, because the media question really comes down to the same old in advertising. It's not about racism. It's about laziness. It's about the same reason why they didn't want to invest in digital, even though digital was going gangbusters, at the same rate they wanted to invest in TV, because it was easier to just put together a buy of 3, 4, 5 major networks and hit all those primetime slots. And it was just easy to do. And it was so hard to go and do something that was targeted across a digital spectrum, or so hard to get involved with all these little podcasts, et cetera. And I think that's when you're talking about a fraction of the media spend, people get upset of it. They just don't want to do the work. I think that's what it comes down to. But representation is a bigger problem that needs to be solved, because that would make people aware of the fact that, Black-owned media, that's going to hit our audience. We need to go there. That's what happens when you have representation.
Laziness implies that what the opposite of lazy, right? And for me, that I would argue that it may not be laziness; it's actually bias and blind spots. Now you can call it unconscious, or you can frame it in however case. But
I agree with you wholeheartedly about that. I mean, I think
I think to therefore that for me, it's amazing how many surprising things I've said that were blatantly obvious if you use Google. Right. And so for me, it's the decision to make. If you can accept that there are biases, then you are actively saying, hey, we've got 7 people who came from the same school that I came from, and they all happen to be friends of my fraternity. And guess what? There's 7 other white guys. And so for me, there's data that shows for venture capital that if the daughter effect, basically senior leaders who had daughters who brought them into the organization made more money because women make better decisions. And it's like, wait, what? Because they had daughters, they kind of brought them into the company and actually invested more and made more money. And so it's the admitting your blind spot, or being open to discussing and aware of them. And therefore, as you say, Bob, representation and inclusion means what don't we have, and that challenge is additive, not depletive. So more of the same is not going to get you more. It did back in the 1960s when you had this stereotypical housewife and all these sort of mental models. But if you're applying that mass approach today with those mental models of what you did before, it's not going to work. And that's the challenge. And so for me, I have little tolerance for leaders who are confused or who are surprised, because the data and the evidence is out there. And I think the challenge is for them to make space for those who can bring those nuances and make more money. And that's the beauty. I keep saying, hey, Black Panther movie made the most money in America than all black cast writers, blah blah blah. And so the whole Colin Kaepernick thing, everyone burnt the Nikes, but apparently those weren't the people who actually made your money. So there's so much evidence that the diverse communities and diverse stakeholders, minority groups, actually do deliver the dollars, but the way you're measuring or the way you're counting actually doesn't reflect the true reality. Once you're open to those pieces, and I think inclusion. And Adam, I'll shut up and get off my soapbox. But I'm more optimistic about this topic because calling people out and showing the numbers suddenly gets them to talk when they wouldn't take action before.
That's number one. Please stay on your soapbox. I'm enjoying it. But two, having the thing that you can call them out on that gets the response is the first step. And so the direct question, is media diversification the right starting point? I'm not sure if it is. However, Bob, you're right. Laziness is preventing people from coming to the table and figuring it out. And it's such a thorny, complicated issue to solve, media diversification, and even figuring out, Rose, to your point, like, okay, well, how would we even divide up if we want to reach different populations and different types of audiences and different people from different races and different backgrounds? That will force the conversations to happen that will eventually yield solutions structurally within organizations. Like Group M will have to figure that out on behalf of their clients. Now everybody's looking and measuring in dollars.
Yes, and there is a huge difference, I would argue, between the customer we visualize and the real customer. And I think we have enough data capabilities now where it would behoove us to look at the reality, because I have been in sessions where I have brought clients to their customers, to their highly loyal, highest spending customers, and they didn't want to see the lives that they lived. They didn't want to see the color of their skin. They did not want to sit in their one-bedroom studio flat. And so I think that a lot of people, hallelujah, brother, a lot of people have got to wake the F up and realize who is spending money on their products, who has the available money to buy a lot of these big brands. The people who aren't necessarily sending their kids to private schools are spending a lot on these big cars. As I've said many a time, the one time I saw Dolce & Gabbana baby booties was on Flatbush Avenue, because he could never make it maybe to the college or the university, but he sure the hell could afford to buy his kid those booties from whatever activity he had chosen to do to make that money.
Well, speaking of clothing, I do want to touch on this one last topic. We've ran out of time, I should say, so we can't talk too much about it. But it was interesting this week that the whole sustainability issue has driven fast fashion to a new competitor. The new competitor is secondhand. ThredUp, Poshmark, all these trading sites, trading apps, etc. They're doing gangbusters, Adam, and it seems like this is a real competitor for the fast fashion industry. I mean, even H&M has been recognizing this and going and doing more recycling in their operations so that they can at least to claim some kind of sustainability. But what do you think about this for the fashion industry? Is fast fashion dead, or is it just on the ropes a little bit right now?
I would say it's on the ropes a little bit, but as real investigation and efforts into the sustainability challenges of fast fashion continue to bubble up, it's going to get harder and harder to rationalize that. If we've talked a lot about purpose in this episode already, but if consumers really are, voting with their credit card, they should be moving away from that and moving towards solutions like secondhand, because it's a pretty simple solution, to getting something new, which is what you want, something new to wear out, and then even a way to recoup some of the funds after you've worn it 2 or 3 times, and you could trade it out to the next person. So if you're seeing H&M make an investment in it, as we've seen, to me, that's a good sign that they're at least hedging and starting to think more about how to capture product without having to create it and some of the harmful practices they've done over time.
Can I just say that my mum, who's 85 years old, this call out to my mum, hey mum, is the one who got me on to ThreadUp. And what I've discovered is that a lot of these recycling guys are really great for people with unusual features. What do I mean by that? My mum wears a size 4 shoe. She is the utter opposite, guys, of me. And so she finds an enormous amount of her size shoes because it's so unusual and it's in the marketplace. Those of us who are larger women, who are the majority of people in America now, it's not so easy for us. It's not so easy for us to find products. And quite frankly, we can be pretty hard on our clothes as well. So I think this is going to be an interesting one with regards who will have the supply of product that is really going to be in the best nick and will be the most popular.
But Rose, I think you said something which I'm going to flip that and say you're not unusual. And your mother is not unusual because there's millions of people with size 4 feet. There's millions. So that's the irony.
But they're 8, Sam. They're 8 years old.
but so where I'm coming from is it's amazing how if you look at the marketplace from the position of the potential of opportunity and say, wow, look at all these people who are underserved or excluded or not properly served, right? And how can we create an offering to reach those people? And guess what? We can make millions and billions of dollars because there's lots of them out there. So I think it's just the mindset because the whole fashion industry focuses on the size 4 in terms of clothing size for women and that thin elite, and the whole hair care industry where focuses on the shiny long wavy hair. And for me, looking at this topic, I'm just thinking of Amazon keep trying to sell me refurbished stuff, right? And in terms of secondhand or used or gently used, I never buy new books unless it's something I can't get. I always get a secondhand. So there are other categories where we do this normally. So I think clothing is catching up and reflecting it. And I think even IKEA, I know I'm jumping to other categories, but they're calling their like vintage line, and they're providing spare parts, and it's smartly jumping on the sustainable bandwagon, but it's actually dealing with the customer and consumer pain point and making your brand a bit more relevant and meaningful because you're sending out the signal of not always pushing consumption of new, but actually showcasing how you're doing something better than you did before, right? So this whole purpose and all that kind of stuff. Okay, I can't save the planet, but what can I do to be better? And I think for me, this is what this trend is signaling, and there are so many parallels in other categories that I'm excited that we will see this for what it is, but also the marketers, the CMOs, the decision makers don't just fob this off and say it's not for me, but actually realize, wow, this is how I can be better and how I can show how I'm being accountable versus saying I can't do purpose, my brand doesn't have anything to talk about. There are so many food brands that can help with food waste. And so there's so many ways you can actually be relevant. And I think this secondhand, this used, refurbished, whatever you want to call it, is so relevant to you and your category.
Preach, Sam, preach.
Well, with that, it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Ms. Rose Cameron. You can find her on LinkedIn, but she is an incredible consultant doing fantastic work in the innovation space for brands and marketers. So tell us what's going on in your world, Rose. What would you like to promote?
Well, I would like to promote, if you don't mind me promoting these guys, because they're not sponsors of you, but can I promote Chewy?
Sure. Why not?
I'd like to promote Chewy this week because they're a pet company, delivery company and all this.
Wait a minute. Do you have a dog?
Yeah, I was going to say, is this a product placement? Bob, is the show being hijacked?
I have got a dog now because I bought a dog for my husband as a therapy dog, and then he died on me. But she's been my therapy dog and just a wonderful little creature. And then we got a cat. So now I've got a cat, a chinchilla, and a dog, which makes it a very strange and loud household. But the thing is, Chewy, when I phoned and said I had to change passwords when Norbert died, and I said Coco's daddy died, they sent flowers.
Oh, wow. That's really
and
nice.
they didn't have to. And I want to show brands that when you do something nice like that, you get called out in podcasts like this. So thank you, Chewy. That was really kind. You didn't have to do it, and you never charged me for the flowers. I checked. So thank you.
Fantastic. That's a great story. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, when the brand reaches out and does something like that, it sticks with you forever. I'm still talking about my Zappos experience years ago. I won't go into it again. The listeners have heard it dozens of times. But next up, we have Sam Monnie. You can find him at CIsquared.net. That's the home of CI Squared, the consultancy where he is one of the managing partners. Tell us what's going on in your world, Sam. What would you like to promote?
Well, just reflecting on Rose's comment, and the beauty of that is until the algorithms and robots take over, the humans are in charge, and the humans tend to do the right thing. So that's great to hear. On my side, yes, I know, Bob, you like me. You allow me, like me. I was going to say, no, you probably don't like me to come on and promote my podcast, but you don't mind it. And so here, world exclusive, for season 5 of Across the Pond Marketing Transformed, featuring my co-host Chris Lawson and myself, Samuel Monnie. We're back. We're coming back in the next few weeks, and we're calling it the Marketing Transformed Playlist. We're joined by some of the best minds on both sides of the pond, which we're really excited about, change makers who are impacting the culture and basically making marketing for the better, and a lot of the things I was jumping on about earlier, and people who've ripped up the rule book. So we're calling it the Marketing Transform Playlist because you get an interview episode that you normally kind of get with a special guest, but then it's accompanied by an aftercast episode, trademark aftercast. And in the aftercast episode, you're going to get a recap, a reflection, and our kind of extended remix of the topics that we felt deserved more attention. So if you're an entrepreneur, rising star, or CMO, if you're looking for new ideas, check out Marketing Transformed podcast, Across the Pond Marketing Transformed. You can find us at marketingtransformed.com, on Spotify, Apple, Google, and all good podcast platforms.
As if I need to say any more, because it's just like, I think you've all got a sense of what Sam's like on his own show now that you've heard him on my show. So take that as your one advocate or whatever lauding of his work. He's really just the same person in real life as he is on the show. So you gotta engage with his content. It's definitely worth your time. Last but not least, Adam Pierno. You can find him at adampierno.com. That's where you can buy his books. That's where you can find out what he's doing. You can get in touch with him. I mean, that's the place to do it. So tell us what's going on in your world, Adam. What would you like to promote?
Thanks, Bob. Based on my second book, Specific, I get a lot of outreach from businesses that are looking for help building their brands. And a lot of the smaller businesses would call and say, hey, we could use your help. We'd love a proposal. And if you are running a small business, you don't have a marketing team, you don't have a budget for that, you didn't think, you just don't know what the context is. To help those small businesses, I created an online course, which is called Specific Branding for Small Business. And I launched it last month, and it's honestly, it is just the same methodology I use with brands in the Fortune 100, brands of all shapes and sizes, but it's in 8 video lessons. And I provide all the same tools that I use, absent some subscription research that I can't afford to give everyone for free. But you can get it at specific.podia.com. And so far, the feedback's been great. So if you know someone who's running a small business and would love to understand and build a brand for themselves, that's the way to do it.
Definitely the future of education, online learning. We're going to see more and more of this in the coming years. So check it out. I mean, it sounds like a great course, Adam. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. And of course, you can find out how to get your, let's try to say this again. I've been doing this show for just a little too long tonight. You can even find out how to advertise on our program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, Sam, Ryan Reynolds, I understand that he does some great work, and he's done his little agency has done some great work that's gotten a lot of attention. But I was pretty skeptical at first, but he has more than proved me wrong. He's put together a good thing. And now that he's kind of merging his company with another company that does not the same thing, but does something that is complementary, which is another smart move, I might add. He announced his merger in one of the best viral videos that I've ever seen for a merger acquisition subject. I mean, it was really well done. It handled the PR excellently. What do you think about this?
when you have creative people, that's the thing. I don't want to believe he had this idea as well, because then he's like, oh, he's good looking, he's rich, and he's the most creative person in the world. I'm just, not hating, but just stating. So it's amazing what happens when you allow creative people to do creative things. They've ripped up the rule book of how you announce a merger, and guess what? All mergers will continue to be lamer now that he's done it the right. Now there'll be the Ryan Reynolds announcement and every other announcement. So please step up your merger, acquisition, and all sorts of other types of corporate moves. Do it the way Ryan did. Don't do it the way you had planned to before.
Well said. Well said. Well, the fail for this week I'm going to give to the fact that Google has, after many months of talking about the end of cookies and how it was imminent, has delayed the end of cookies till 2023. And I got to ask, Adam, is this ever going to happen? I mean, it's just like there's so much pushback against it. And, I think Google must have been feeling the pressure. Obviously, they were being sued by the European Union over it. So, I mean, they have some big problems with the current situation. Phlox is not ready to step up to the plate. So what do you think?
Well, number one, as a marketer, I'm relieved that it bought me some time to deal with this as we've been trying to figure out what the hell it was going to mean for everybody in the next couple months as they were announcing and then pulling the carrot away from us. But we're going to get to a fork in the road where Google is the infrastructure for most of these things. And if they want to change it, something's going to have to give. I mean, I don't think they're going to push it out indefinitely, but I also don't think they are supporting a lot of the technology that is shared out of the goodness of their hearts. So we'll get there eventually. Maybe in summer 2029, we'll start talking about a real solution for Phlox and figuring out what the future is that includes consumer privacy.
Yeah, we can hope. We can always hope. And the last one is the foul of the week. And the foul, hi doggy. The foul of the week is going to a subject that we talked about on the show last week. Amazon and Google have been officially targeted by watchdog groups over control of fake reviews. It looks like they're going to court over this, and it's not pretty, Rose, the way this is going down. I mean, they obviously claim that they're doing what they can to prevent fake reviews from going online and fooling shoppers into buying products that are substandard because of the obvious fake reviews. But is there any bright light in this? I mean, it's just like, it seems like this is just going to be an ugly fight for a long time, and nothing's going to actually happen or transpire that's going to improve the situation. What are your thoughts?
Yep, it's horrible.
Well, have a suggestion for this list. Coco. Yes, Coco is the arbiter. Bezos, pull your finger out. I know he's stepping down. I looked at this story and thinking, hang on a minute, Amazon can't solve a problem, really? Come on, sir. It's like, really? You don't know how to fix this problem? Oh, why don't I believe you? There's some reason why I just can't. I refuse to believe that this is the one problem that you're not able to solve. So I'm apologies to all the people who work at Amazon. I love you dearly, but come on, son.
Yeah, you can't solve it if you don't try.
See, there you go.
There you go. Well, have a suggestion for this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag #FairFailFoul. That's #FairFailFoul. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again in 2 weeks because we're taking off for the 4th of July holiday. Hope to see you then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. It's just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.